Hey, good morning, everybody. We're going to wait another minute or so just to let a few more folks join the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks. All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining Akili's webcast this morning. How to navigate SAP BPC's changing solution roadmap with the recent announcement of BPC 11 really is the context for today's presentation. My name is Sean Granfield. I'm Akili's Director of Marketing and Alliances. Before we get started today, I have a few housekeeping items for our audience. Your audio will be muted for the duration of the call this morning. Please use the on-screen chat panel if you do experience issues with the audio, and we'll do our best to adjust that for you. Feel free to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation this morning through the on-screen chat box as well, and we'll get to those towards the end of the presentation today. The full presentation and recording will be emailed to everybody no later than this Friday. Now I'm going to take a moment to introduce our speakers and tell everyone a little bit of background on Akili. So Akili is based in Dallas, Texas. We also have offices in Houston and Denver, and we've been around since 1992. Our core focus areas here at Akili are business planning. That includes financial planning, sales performance management, and supply chain planning. We have support services, managed services for everything in your tech environment. We do data analytics, enterprise integration, data warehousing strategies, and also change management. You can also see there at the bottom of the screen a number of awards that we've been extremely proud and privileged to receive over the time of our company. Specifically, though, I want to call out a recognition as one of the best companies to work for in Texas, as it really reflects the culture and type of company we've built here, and that's something we're extremely proud of and continue to strive for year after year. Now I want to move on to our speakers for today. We have Alan Boyer and David Allen presenting today's content. Alan Boyer, Akili's Vice President of Delivery, has been with Akili for 12 years, with 25 total years of experience in both corporate and consulting environments. He spent 6 years prior to joining Akili as a CEO of a large home goods retailer, giving him a unique perspective on selecting and adopting technology specifically in the EPM space. David Allen, Akili's SAP pre-sale lead, has been with Akili for over 3 years and provides over a decade of knowledge and experience implementing and managing SAP environments, focusing on driving sustainable business value throughout the organization. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Alan. Take it away.
Thanks, Sean. So just real quickly, we'll cover what we're going to talk about today. We want to start really looking back a little bit at some of the BPC versions and the kind of the path that we've gone to get to where we are today at BPC 11. Give an overview of what's happening in BPC 11, kind of a big picture view of that, and then talk about some of the new features that are coming out in BPC 11. And then David's going to talk to us briefly about BWAHANA, which is a key component of this, and kind of how SAP has enabled BPC 11 and the new features of this, and how they're rolling this version of the solution out. And then we'll talk briefly about the BPC 11 roadmap. So with that, let's dive into it. So this timeline actually came from SAP. I think it's a great chart to show really what SAP has done over the last almost 10 years, really, with the planning solutions in their overall portfolio. And if you've been in the SAP environment for a while, and I think most of you who are on the call have been, you know that there's been quite a few planning solutions. There were some legacy things from the SAP world, as well as different flavors of BPC. So to kind of summarize that real quickly, going all the way back to the predecessor, if you've been in the BPC environment, you probably know this. If you haven't, you may not. But the BPC product actually originated as a third-party company called OutlookSoft, created the product going back into the early 2000s. Started with versions 4X and 5X. They actually ran on solely on the Microsoft platform. This is actually when Akili became involved in the planning space, the enterprise performance management space, going back to about 2005. So we've actually been in this arena for about 12 years. But as many of you know, when SAP bought it, they pretty quickly started moving to creating kind of two branched versions of the solution, a Microsoft and a NetWeaver version, starting in 2007, releasing another version 7.5 in 2010. That again was both a NetWeaver and a Microsoft version, and things started diverging a little bit more at that point to a NetWeaver version in 10.0 in 2012. They followed that with a Microsoft version as well, and then of course 10.1 came out in 2014, which introduced the idea of standard models and embedded models, which was a pretty big change, and I think a change that really created some confusion in the marketplace with what that meant and where SAP was going with that. Eventually, they came out with a 10.1 version for Microsoft as well. I'm going to kind of drop down to the bottom of this diagram and kind of talk about that for just a second. Again, there have been a lot of planning solutions in SAP's portfolio as well prior to them acquiring OutlookSoft and products that they continue to maintain for quite some time. In particular, one of the things that kind of is really relative to the BPC world is the BWIP components. As many of you know, in 2011, they started integrating the BWIP components into the BPC world with the planning application kit and kind of bringing that into BW and into BPC. And so things really started coming together on the NetWeaver platform in 2014, and then later in 2014 they introduced the first version that was specific to S4 HANA with the BPC optimized for S4 HANA. And then when they updated S4 HANA in 2016, they obviously updated that version of BPC Optimized as well and added some functionality to that. And now in 2017, they've released the version of BPC 11, which runs on BWAHANA. Now, one thing to note, if you look at this, the BWIP components, basically SAP has come out now and said those are no longer going to be enhanced. There will be a maintenance mode for those for a period of time, but that version will no longer receive functional updates, and SAP would recommend that you not move forward with any new solutions on that platform at this point. That's true for several other solutions such as BPS as well, though it's not included on this diagram. And then on the top, they have also announced the Microsoft versions in a similar mode. There will be maintenance for that for a period of time, but no significant investments are being made, no significant functional enhancements on that. So really, what this means going forward is there's really two versions of BPC. And both of those versions are really going to run on the HANA platform. That is the foundation for the versions going forward. One of those is the S4 HANA version. And I believe from being in this space for quite some time and kind of seeing the evolution of this product, there's been a lot of confusion about what that really means. When people talk about the embedded version, really what's happening is BW 7.5 is embedded as the analytics engine within S4 HANA, and that BW embedded version includes BPC 10.1, and it's essentially the same version of 10.1 that exists on a standalone environment in the NetWeaver platform as well. So this is essentially an embedded financial planning solution within S4 HANA. Okay. So the other is now this new version of BPC, BPC 11 that runs on BWAHANA. This is an add-on to the BWAHANA environment, much like in prior versions like in 10.1 NetWeaver, BPC was an add-on within that BW environment running on HANA. The S4 HANA version of this is really running on a completely different application platform, which is NetWeaver. If you've been in this environment, you know that for some time. That is not true going forward. BW4HANA does not run on that platform. This is running directly on the HANA platform. Is probably the best way to say that. So one of the things that SAP is touting for the BPC 11 version is that this is obviously a standalone deployment. It's not dependent on S4, and it's intended to be a broader planning platform than just a pure financial planning platform. So let's dive into BPC 11. So many of you probably seen a slide like this. This is SAP's view of what the overall value proposition is for the BPC product. And this is prior to BPC 11. This is not really unique to that. And I'm not going to go through all of these. Many of you have seen it, but you know, the key stuff that they talk about a lot is still there. Reduced total cost of ownership, a single platform for planning and consolidations, enables a much faster close time for companies, a very flexible solution, a very robust enterprise level planning solution, and a consolidation solution. The things though that you will see SAP focusing on with the enhancements and the evolution that they're doing with BPC 11 is really around a few key areas. One is the data integration, and this is really enabled by what SAP is doing with BW/HANA. This is really, BW/HANA is just by its nature is intended to be an enterprise data warehouse, which BW was at times positioned for that, but any of you who've been in the BW environment know, and for a long time know that it was not the easiest thing in the world to get data into or out of BW. That is something that SAP is changing, and so the value you always had of the integration to other SAP systems through the pre-built connectors and things like that are still there, obviously, but it's a now more open environment. The other is enhanced visualization. And a lot of this is a key theme that you're going to hear around BPC 11 is the integration with the analytics cloud and using that capability kind of from multiple perspectives. But one of them is certainly on the visualization side. Historically, BPC, the visualization components directly in BPC have been really limited to what Excel could do. There's now some more stuff added within the web components of BPC 11, as well as how you can leverage the analytics cloud. The other is performance. You know, again, the platform has been changed essentially with BW/HANA to leverage more of the capabilities of HANA, and therefore that is now more directly leverageable within BPC 11. And then the last is really moving the solution more to the cloud, both by leveraging the analytics cloud platform, as well as starting to provide private cloud solutions for BPC as well. So some of the advantages out of that, one of the things that SAP is trying to do with this version is to simplify. And again, part of that is what they're doing on the back end with BW/HANA. So if you've worked in recent versions of BPC and embedded models, you know that the planning, the modeling pieces of that were more challenging, definitely more technical, and obviously they took that out of the business user's hands. They're not completely changing that. That's not going to go all the way back to the business users being able to build embedded models the way they could before, but they've greatly enhanced the ability to do that with some of the modeling tools that are there. The data loading processes are just becoming much more streamlined and much faster due to how the integration is happening and the power of HANA. And it remains still as one of the few products in the marketplace that supports both planning and consolidations on a single platform. BW/HANA is enabling a much more open environment as well. You've got the ability to bring data from a lot of sources, and SAP is adding more integration to the cloud solutions, particularly again the analytics cloud component. With this running on HANA, on BW/HANA in particular, the ability to handle larger sets of data in the planning process and in the analytics process is a capability that, quite honestly, as a consulting firm implementing BPC on prior versions, even 10.1 on HANA, on BW on HANA, we would have shied away from some of the use cases that might have required much larger sets of data. That is something that is becoming enabled through the platform now. The interface has been updated quite a bit. Sorry, can you go back on the interface has been updated quite a bit again, both on the BPC web admin pieces and the user pieces have been updated to make them much more user-friendly, much easier to navigate, as well as what you can do through the SAP Analytics Cloud. And we talked about the performance. There's the ability to push things down into that. So we'll talk about a couple of these things as we go to the next step. So the other thing that I mentioned this in one of the earlier slides, but come back to this. This is something that SAP is starting to talk about within the BPC platform that I think is a change from what you've heard before. If you look at the right-hand side of this slide, and you've been in the BPC system for a while, this is really common to have models that do things like headcount and personnel cost type planning, workforce management type of planning. Capital models is something we've seen forever, revenue pricing, so on, rolling into the core financial statement stuff, P&L, balance sheet, and cash flow. That's something that's been there for quite some time, to have those individual models, and relatively easy to integrate those modules as well. The thing that you'll see SAP promoting more going forward, and this is, again, I think this is really enabled by the platform and what you can do now with the capabilities of HANA supporting it, is driving into more of sales planning and getting into really detailed customer product level things. And again, I think we've had multiple instances in the past when we worked with customers, and sometimes customers wanted to drive this down to a detailed product level, and we just found that there were some constraints in the ability to do that within the system, and those are really being removed at this point. And so that can run from a full sales plan to demand plan, supply chain planning type scenarios, and then fully integrating those into your financial planning process as well. And of course, strategic planning has always been a part of what you can do, and that is still something you can do the high level planning and drive that down into the more detailed financial planning as well. So what's new in BPC 11? I've mentioned this a couple of times in the Analytics Cloud, but this is one of the key themes that you'll hear is the integration to Analytics Cloud, and you'll get it from a couple of flavors. One is the ability to integrate to, whether it's an on-prem or a private cloud implementation of BPC 11, the ability to have a bidirectional movement of that data. And you could do that in prior versions, but if you tried to do it, it was pretty clunky. It was not real seamless. A lot of times it was a manual process. That is being enhanced significantly. And one of the key use cases that SAP has integrated into this is the ability to do your larger enterprise corporate level planning within BPC 11 in that core solution, that on-prem or that private cloud solution, and the ability then to use people that may be out in the field and a little disconnected from corporate and regional offices, or out there in certain lines of business segments for you, to be able to come in and do planning just within their world, like sales volume type planning or expense planning by cost center type stuff. And so instead of having to have them in BPC, in the Excel add-in, people that may only be in the system a few times a year, this is the easy way to push something out to them to collect that data and bring it directly into BPC, while then also providing you all the enhanced visualization we've already mentioned around Analytics Cloud directly against BPC in a real-time mode. Okay. The other thing that SAP is really doing, and this is quite honestly, this is a really significant thing from SAP. If you went to Sapphire this year, you heard a lot about this and starting to leverage the predictive capabilities that are being developed within the core HANA platform. And so a lot of that is being done within the SAP Analytics Cloud. And so there are use cases that are available now to enable that. And so SAP is creating a vision and creating a model for people to move through this analytics maturity mode, if you will. And I think a lot of companies, if you look at this graph and kind of look at the very far left side of this at the bottom, a lot of companies, when they start out in their planning exercise, what we see is they're just really struggling with data, quite honestly. They're managing stuff in spreadsheets. There's a lot of manual stuff, and they just don't have good data, or they're spending a tremendous amount of time getting to that point where they have good data. And as they progress, they take care of that problem. They start taking care of getting standard reports, enterprise level reports. They start providing people the ability to do ad hoc reporting and analytics. And I think most companies that have used BPC for a while, they're at that point. They've reached those levels, right? What SAP is creating now are tools to let you say, great, that's giving you the ability to look back and look at what has happened, right? But what everybody wants, the golden key for everyone is, so how can I get better at looking forward, right? How do I do a better job of that? And that's where the predictive pieces of this come in. And there are scenarios built already in the system today where you can take data out of BPC into the Analytics Cloud. You can use the predictive model to look back at that data and perform the correlation and say, these factors really will determine help me determine how things are going to perform going forward, and it will create that model for you. And so as you then plan those variables, those factors, those basic assumptions, it can then predict, revenue and cost components as an example. And it's actually pretty interesting. It will show you if that model had been in place and those results and those drivers had come out this way, here's what it would have predicted, and it shows you how close it would have tracked to what your actual results were. And you kind of see that on the graph on the bottom right side of this. So this is an area where SAP is investing a lot, and is definitely not just in the BPC product, quite honestly, but across their portfolio, investing this machine learning and predictive type capability into the business process. And they're in this version of BPC, they're starting to do that through the integration to SAP Analytics Cloud. So we talked a lot about integration. It's a pretty busy graph. I'll try to simplify this, but at the end of the day, what SAP has done with this through again enabled really through BWAHANA, you've obviously got you may have a SAP HANA system running. You could be running the standalone, as we talked about. If you have S4, that's probably going to be a shared HANA platform now, and so you've obviously got very quick, easy, direct access to that. That's pre-built into this platform to get access to that, to get just like what you see now, to get access to the master data and the transactional data. However, you are certainly not limited to that. There are connectors built to a lot of other sources. You can see those on the side to both structured and unstructured data to bring into the platform and have access to. And then you've got the traditional sources you've always had on the right-hand side to get to other systems and replicate that data close to a real-time view if needed, or certainly through more standard mass updates into the system. And so this is leveraging nothing unique to BPC here. This is leveraging other technologies SAP has been developing some time on the HANA platform and using that now on BPC 11. As we've mentioned, there are new interfaces. So there's kind of a couple of simple graphs here, or screenshots here. If you've used BPC 10.1, the one on the left is going to look pretty familiar to you. I think it's pretty interesting how the interface stuff evolves. I will tell you, when 10.1 came out, my initial reactions were, this is awesome. This is so much cleaner. It looks so much nicer. However, after I used it a little bit, I will say I felt like it was clunky, at times. The multi-window mode that they used, I thought was kind of clunky. And I think you figured it out like most, but I wouldn't say this is the most seamless and productive experience that I think most people had. They've rewritten that interface completely. It is much more Fiori-like. It's not Fiori, but it's much more Fiori-like in its presentation and how you navigate around that. And I think for the homepage for the end users in particular, I think it's a little simpler. The favorites are kind of easier to access and manage. And on the right-hand side, they have this activities timeline now where you can have things that are assigned to you within a planning process or consolidations process that show right there, and you can link right into those to go do that. I also have the ability to do more visualization directly within BPC without having to go to HANA Analytics Cloud or something like that to build some charts and graphs and things like that, and can put those on my homepage if I want to do that. The modeling tools that are kind of enhancing the experience on the back end. A couple of things on this. One, there's just new tools that are available now to do this. That since it is on HANA, and that's where the development is really happening. The standard HANA development environment, the development tools are available, or you can use the Eclipse development environment to help with that. And so that is substantially simplified. In addition, just the development itself is simplified. And David's going to talk about this a little bit more, but it's simplified just because BW4HANA has simplified the number of objects that are available to you, and trying to streamline that whole process to make that a little easier to do that. And with that comes a bit of a challenge in the deprecation of some of the legacy objects that exist as well, though. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The other is performance. We worked with several customers over the last 3 or 4 years that have migrated to HANA. And I think some of them would tell you that they saw significant changes in performance as a result of that. I think some of them would also tell you they were a little disappointed in the ability to push some more complex calculations and functions into HANA and leverage that capability more than they've had the ability to. And so that's one of the things that SAP is working on. You can push some of the formulas directly into HANA now and have those calculated within HANA instead of in the application environment. Box formulas, if you're working in that environment, they can be kind of pushed into HANA as well. I will also tell you that just through some of the changes that have happened in the interface to HANA, really from an ABAP perspective, more than anything, you can actually leverage HANA SQL easier now in a standard model than you could. We actually have a large project going on right now with a customer that was actually looking at using the embedded models. They had some concerns about that, and really from an end user perspective, and what that would be to them and how they would work in that environment. They were an existing customer and they were more comfortable with standard. And we're in the middle of doing a lot of work with them right now using HANA SQL within the ABAP code, basically to perform those calculations. And our early work with them on that's been very positive, and they're very excited about what overall they're going to be able to do with that. So that's not directly related to this, but I think it's more and more that kind of capability is being opened up within the platform. So on the Microsoft Office side, again, this is an area that I think has been a little confusing over the last few years. There's not a lot of changes on this, with some small exceptions. It's still the EPM add-in is still available, and it will continue to be available. That is still the recommended interface to use for BPC standard models. However, SAP is saying that the EPM add-in can be used in an embedded model, but there will be some limitations on functionality. It is not yet clear exactly what those limitations are. They have not published that yet. I actually talked to one of our consultants last night who's in an enablement course with SAP yesterday and today, and we talked a little bit last night just to see what we're getting out of that. And they communicated it's clear that that is their path, but they have not provided yet data on what that's going to look like. On the flip side, analysis for Office is still the suggested the platform to use for a BPC embedded model, and they've actually said the same thing. They're actually enabling analysis for Office to be used on a standard model as well, but again, there will be some limitations on the functionality on that. The EPM 10 version will no longer be supported on this. And there is actually another version of the analysis for Office add-in that I do not believe is GA yet. It was just there was a webinar on it a week or two ago announcing some pretty substantial new functionality on analysis for Office, and that would be supported as well on this platform. So in terms of what's removed, probably the most significant, I think, for most customers, and this is a migration issue, is the EVDRE function. If you've been on the platform for a while, you know that EVDRE was the reporting solution in 7.5. When they went to version 10, they initially they intended to roll it out and not provide support for EVDRE and only provide support for the EPM add-in. And I think they got quite a bit of feedback on that, so they maintained the ability to run it, though they really tried to restrict the ability to create new stuff with it. So if you've been in the environment, you know that, you've experienced that. Quite honestly, it's been an enabler, what they ended up doing for migrations for a lot of people, because you could then move your stuff to version 10 and you could choose to not rewrite a bunch of reports if you didn't want to and leave them running EVDRE. That's going to be a challenge going forward to go to 11, because you won't be able to run EVDRE-based reports anymore. If you use EPM Unwired for any mobile enablement, that's not going to be there. The thin integration platform, that framework, is no longer supported on BWAHANA. Custom branding is not there, and we mentioned earlier, BPS is no longer supported as well. And SAP is very strong in saying you should not start any net new BPS work at this point, because there will not be any migration path ever provided for that. So, speaking of paths for BPC 11, and I know this is the thing we hear a lot of customers kind of asking questions about, and this has been a question around 7.5 to 10. What SAP has provided is just basic guidance right now. If you're on BPC and you're on Oracle or SQL Server or something like that running on BW, your path is going to need to get to 10.1 on HANA. There are then some updates that are going to have to be made in HANA to get to the latest version of BW, in BW to get the latest version of BW, and make sure you have the BWAHANA add-on, and then there will be a migration path to BPC 11. They have not fully released yet those migration tools, and we are being told right now that that should happen in Q4 of this year, but they are saying there will be some migration capability. So the full extent of that is not completely known yet. But they are talking about tools that will be provided for that. So if you're a BWIP customer today and you're running that on, again, something like Oracle or SQL Server, it's somewhat similar. You need to get to a version of BW 7.5 where you can install the planning analytics kit, applications kit, and then upgrade that stack to BW4HANA starter add-on, and then you have a migration path. And if you're running that IP stuff on HANA, it's a very similar path. You've got to deal with kind of the upgrades within BW. If you're on the Microsoft platform, there is not a provided migration path, and every indication from SAP would be there's not going to be a migration path provided for that, and that will be a re-implementation, basically, from that solution set. So with that overview of kind of BPC and the features and all that have been added there, I'm going to turn it over to David to talk a little bit about BW4HANA and give you some overview of that solution set and what they're doing there.
All right, thanks, Alan. I appreciate it. As you've heard over the past 20 minutes or so, a lot of the functionalities around BPC is due to the changes around BW4HANA. And so we just want to take a few minutes and just give you a highlight of what that is. But to let you know, there is going to be a specific webinar on Thursday, September 28th, where we go into really the roadmap for BW4HANA and kind of look at where you're at today and where you need to be in the future, because it's not only just affecting BPC, but all of the applications that you may be running in your historical BW environment. Overall, BW4HANA is going to have a lot of the same value statements around what they've been talking about for S4, a much more simplified data structure, a lot of consolidation around how data is being represented within BW. And overall, data is becoming, the asset of most companies. And so BW is going to be that provider that can really manage the tiered support of that data. So you're going to have the right data in the right storage complex, so you're getting the most value out of what you need, have access to the things that are the most important within HANA, and then using lower tier storage where it is appropriate. Ultimately, what SAP wants you to realize and what the real value statement around the BW4HANA solution is that it's ultimately going to be natively integrated, all the embedded analytics around your S4 solution, around what is already being built inside your HANA environment, and bring them together to compare real-time actuals with historical snapshots. It'll complete planning results and scenario planning like we talked about here within BPC. And then it has much better access to your third-party data because it is sitting on HANA as part of the HANA toolkit. Overall, it's going to provide you a complementary solution to look at not only what you can do with inside the S4 solution and what's in HANA, but really all the extended applications provided by SAP associated with the BW4HANA activity. One thing to note here is BW4HANA, ultimately is the logical successor of your existing BW environment, but it is a new application. It is written, from the ground up, all new code line, and ultimately is not dependent on the NetWeaver delivery system. It is a part of the HANA components and uses the ABAP application and HANA and solution. Ultimately, SAP is providing capabilities to run this solution in your own data centers on-premise like you historically have done, but they are certifying both Microsoft, Amazon, and then HEX solutions within SAP to provide you a cloud-based solution for that. Once again, this is going to be, it could be separate from your existing S4 environment, but it can also sit on your existing HANA platform. Finally, I think the one thing that's going to happen here is that SAP wants you to understand that there's a real unification going on, and it's not just for planning purposes. It's going to be to drive an overall data governance to your enterprise data warehouse. And because of its access to third-party data, it's really going to provide you a much more unified solution than going forward. But to get there, we BPC environments, it's not uncommon to see multiple BW scenarios. They'll have a BW environment for their data warehouse, for a lot of their historical SAP data. They may have one for third-party data, and they actually may have one specifically for their BPC environment. And so SAP has laid out a real highlighted scenario that we'll get in more detail in the next webinar, but it's going to walk through kind of how Alan talked about from a BPC perspective. Ultimately, You may want to look at a new implementation or a fresh start, just depending on where you are at with your current data warehouse. Ultimately, there is going to be an in-place system conversion. So if you have an existing system that meets the requirements, you can move through an upgrade path to get that conversion to be compliant with BWAHANA. We can see a lot of BPC customers doing that with one of their existing solutions, and then maybe consolidating any outside data warehouse into the new environment. And ultimately, there's going to be a landscape transformation an option. So where you can take any one of your existing systems and move forward with it, or consolidate it into a new environment. A great time to really think about how to utilize the cloud if you're using an on-prem scenario. As Alan pointed out, there is going to be a lot more activity associated with not only BPC and the cloud solutions, but also how we bring data across system to system through existing on-prem and cloud-based solutions that BWAHANA will try to leverage. So I think we're going to move into talking about the roadmap for BPC, but I just want to remind you that we are going to be going into more detail about the webinar on Thursday, September 28th. Thanks.
Thank you, David. So we'll just end real quickly here with some roadmap information that's been provided from SAP. And so when you look at this slide, really the planned innovation section, this in the middle, is really what's just been released recently with BPC 11. So from an overall BPC solution, what they're saying is that this release really provided that BWAHANA compliance. So there was a lot of material that came out when BWAHANA came out that said it's pretty interesting, enterprise data warehouse, all the BW capability, but there's no BPC component that's missing. And so that's been resolved, and that's been added. The other big thing we talked about here was the business objects cloud, the analytics cloud integration. They've changed the name of that since they published the roadmap on there. And then we didn't talk about this one, but there has been some advancements in the consolidations. There is some changes in the consolidations, monitor and enhance that. They've added the matrix consolidation capability in there as well. Again, the user interface piece of that has been enhanced as well. The things that are being discussed as part of the roadmap going forward is a deeper development on the consolidation side. So pushing that, and they've talked about this for a while, pushing that logic engine deeper into HANA to facilitate just the time that it takes to do that and expedite that overall process. And then providing incremental consolidations, some more general capabilities, things like that. There are limitations today. If you worked on the embedded platform, the comments functionality is not as robust as what you see on the latest standard models. They're working on improving that in BPF. They're working on simplifying things in the future state around the modeling and not having to do so much on the backside to build the queries, and as an example. And then the last one, and again, this is just something I think you're going to continue to see, is deeper integration with the predictive analytics side. And I think that what you have today is a basic model to pull some data in and do some basic predictive analytics and modeling, and then bring that back into BPC for planning purposes. I think that, and again, this is a broader statement, I think, from on the SAP side and what you're going to see from them with the predictive components, but it's more of predefined use cases that would say, here's a model that's already built. You give me data, these data components, and I'll give you the result for this, where you don't have to do much work to set that up. So a best practices kind of view, if you will. So the last comment I'll make on this is on the bottom left of this. SAP has announced an end of life now for version 10.1 of NetWeaver. It's out a little bit, but it is the end of 2022. So now that had not really been there before, but at the end of the day, we said this earlier, but I'll kind of end the comments on this. SAP is really moving forward now with two flavors of BPC, both running on HANA. One, if you want to run right up against S/4HANA in that environment with an integrated planning solution, you'd run the BPC optimized. And if you've got a much more robust, broader planning solution using data from a lot of sources, not just from S4, then you'd look at the BPC standalone solution, BPC 11 standalone solution running on BWAHANA. So with that, I'll go back to Sean.
Fantastic. Thank you both, Alan and David, for the presentation today. Hopefully everybody got some value out of that content. And now we want to go ahead and take some questions from the group. So I'm going to go ahead and give everybody a moment to enter those in the on-screen chat panel if you haven't done so already. So please enter those now. Okay, great. So first question coming in, I think this is a pretty high level, but makes a lot of sense. When do you guys, and I think I'll look to Alan first on this, expect companies to start the transition to BPC 11, just kind of in your experience? What's that journey look like typically?
Well, I think it's important to know, we didn't talk about this, but it is GA now, so it's generally available. It is a product that you can order. It's obviously new and it's early, so there are some early adopters that have started on that path already. We actually have conversations with some existing customers that are starting to look at that. So the thing that has to be considered, obviously, is where you are today. Do you do a lot of BW-based planning? Are you pretty much doing all of your planning in BPC? And what version are you on? And so I think the thing is it is going to require some planning. David had mentioned some things around BWAHANA, and he and I actually talked about this a little bit in preparation for this webinar. I think that if you're a legacy BW environment and you've done a lot of work in the BW environment, the first thing you're going to want to look at is the actual migration to BW, because that's going to be a key piece. You're going to be leveraging a lot of kind of BW content that's going to have to be moved that supports BPC, and in all likelihood, you're going to change some things to take advantage of some of the things in BW4HANA now. So I think that would be probably the key first step, and then look at what does that then mean to BPC and how do I move that. This is not going to change the functionality of BPC 11 versus BPC 10.1 is very similar. A lot of the changes here are about this platform change and what that opens up and the integration to Analytics Cloud and things like that. So the migration of the BPC stuff by itself will be relatively straightforward from 10.1 to 11. 7.5 is obviously a little more complicated because you've got to move some of those 7.5 components to 10 first.
And actually helps answer another question there. And I think something I'll kind of group these questions together. A couple of people are mentioning this. I don't know who would want to speak to this, but can you maybe speak to SAP's, I don't know if you call it a strategy, but the reason behind some of these end of mainstream maintenance decisions they're making and maybe the implications of that?
I don't know that I can speak too much to their mindset behind those changes, other than a typical software company. It's expensive to support a lot of different platforms, and at the end of the day, I think if you've been in the SAP ecosystem for the last 3 or 4 years, you know that they've had a significant focus on innovation, and they're very much trying to push customers to those platforms where that innovation exists. Now they're not investing in the older solution sets anymore. All of the innovation is happening in that new platform, and so I think that's generally what's driven by.
Got it. No, thank you for that. Another question just came in. Let's see here. What is the best way for a existing user to create that plan of action and determine, what are the, what's that, I think, transition look like, and also the cost component of that? Kind of what goes into forming that?
For a transition, a migration?
Yeah, I mean, what would that look like if they're on an older version of SAP of BPC and they want to be looking at 11.0?
That's definitely not a new one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So again, I think it's going to go back to that chart that we show that kind of says where are you and kind of how many steps you have to go through. And so the easy, at a really high level, I think what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to step back and look at an assessment of your BW migration first, because there are changes that are going to happen in that environment, and assess what those are and figure out how to move. As David mentioned, there are choices to do that. If you're looking at this and saying, I want to get to BPC 11, but I don't necessarily want to deal with all my legacy BW stuff, I'm okay leaving it where it is. There's a way to say, fine, we can move very quickly on the BPC 11 piece, stand up a BW4HANA instance for that, and only deal with migrating those components into that environment that we need to move. So it's not a simple answer. There are multiple paths to get there, though, based on where you are today on BPC and BW. If you're Microsoft, I'd say it's a little bit of an easier conversation because it is simply a conversation of assessing what do you have in your BPC environment today and what do you want to move, because it's going to be a re-implementation of that. And I think there will be more depth on this in David's conversation in a few weeks on BW/HANA, kind of looking at what that BW migration will look like and those options around this migration. Do you go wholesale? Do you start moving piecemeal of your existing environment into the BW/HANA environment?
That's perfect. And I think that really covers kind of the breadth of the questions there. Some of them you can kind of group together. So thank you both for taking the time to answer those. I think that's some great insight there. So I just want to relay to everybody, thank you for attending today. Thanks for spending some time with us. And we do know that a lot of you have been looking at how do you move forward with BPC based on these questions and just kind of knowing the market today. And some maybe even have struggled with how exactly is that going to happen and the timing of such a substantial change in your organization. And although it is 5 years out, SAP has now put these timelines against the versions. And we understand what that means and can really help you guys, map out that journey and make sure that you guys are prepared for that future state, based on our experience and best practices. So, hopefully we can work with you guys and make sure this is the right transition and done the right way. So we'd love to engage you guys, as Alan mentioned, for that assessment call to better understand what your current environment looks like, and where you guys want to go and what those next steps can be. So, we're going to follow up with everybody, as we stated earlier, with the webinar recording no later than this Friday, and hopefully even sooner. We'll be working with our folks here, as you can see on the screen. So we have Megan O'Connell, one of our sales executives, and Max Goff. They'll be following up with you guys directly with that recording. I'm going to see if we want to schedule that call. Also, as David mentioned, and we're really excited about this, our next webinar on September 28th will be taking everybody through a similar roadmap, but really focused on the BW/HANA. So please be on the lookout for that invitation, and we'd love to have you guys there as well. And again, on behalf of the entire Akili team, just want to thank everybody for your time today, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks.